thanks so much everyone for joining us on this sunny afternoon to discuss flexibility futures, exploring the role of flexibility in the net zero transition. This is the latest interactive Business Green webinar, and we're delighted to be hosting it today with the support of the Energy Networks Association, which many of you will know as the voice of the energy network sector in the UK. My name's James Murray. I'm editor of Business Green, and we've got a fantastic panel of experts today from across the energy network space, including policymakers and policy experts, regulators, and of course the industry itself, to discuss the huge potential of the flexible grid and smart grid market as it is fast evolving. I will be chairing proceedings today. Just a few housekeeping notes as we get underway. This is an interactive webinar. You can ask questions throughout. Please try and use the Q&A function for the questions, as that will be where I will be focusing to pick out questions from the audience for our panel of experts to address. If you have any technical issues or any challenges or with a tool today, we do have a team of experts from ENA and also from Business Green who should be able to help you. So any issues, just drop into the chat there or the Q&A box, and we can hopefully ensure that we can address those as swiftly as possible. Please, yeah, as I say, please do keep questions coming in, because we do have a good 90 minutes or so this afternoon to fill, and we're keen to answer as many questions as possible. As I said, we're delighted to be hosting this event today. I think flexible grids are having a moment, to say the least. We reported on Saturday on Ofgem's latest announcements on the vital role of electric vehicles and electric technologies in driving the net zero transition, and flexible grids and flexible grid services are absolutely critical to enabling so many of the technologies we write about. And yet it's a sector that's probably doesn't get the publicity it deserves, and it is quite challenging to report on as a journalist, because it is inherently quite complicated and there's lots of different aspects to it. But it is absolutely critical. It is the glue, or the foundations, if you will, that will enable so much of the wider energy system decarbonisation, which is of course critical to the net zero transition on every level. So a fascinating area, and we're delighted to be hosting it because it's a fascinating area not just for the insiders who are driving these technologies and this transition, but for businesses as a whole, for the Business Green audience, for sustainability executives and energy managers who can increasingly take advantage of these flexible grid services to help drive down costs, drive down emissions, and of course enable the deployment of those electric vehicles, heat pumps, and myriad other technologies that are going to be so critical to meeting your own net zero targets. So hopefully there'll be a lot to learn over the next hour and a half or so. Lots of issues raised. We'll be looking at the challenges as well as the opportunities that come with this most exciting of sectors. That's it for my opening remarks, but to kick us off, we're delighted to be joined today, before we get into the panel session, by Farina Faria from the ENA, who's going to say a few words about the ENA's work in this space and some of the wider issues that the flexible grid sector is enjoying.
Thank you, James. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Farina Faria. I'm the head of Open Networks at the Energy Networks Association. So by way of introduction, ENA is the trade association that represents all the electricity and gas networks in the UK and in Ireland. As part of our role, we represent the networks and we are the voice of the network. So we lead a number of strategic projects and initiatives on behalf of our members to address, some of the key challenges that we are facing as an industry. Let's move on to the next slide, please. As you know, it is very interesting times for us in the energy industry. So as you know, the UK has set world-leading climate change targets, and as James alluded to earlier, energy networks have a key role to play within the energy transition and helping us enable net zero. So traditionally, electricity networks have been, one-way power systems, but in light of net zero and the changes that are required to deliver that, there is a need for the networks to become more smart and flexible. Next slide, please. So with this in mind, the Open Networks project was started back in 2017. So the project it's a major industry initiative that's essentially looking at how the networks need to change the way they operate to become that smart and flexible energy system. So through the work that we've done over the years, we are helping to deliver that smart and flexible energy system by helping to open up local markets for flexibility. So a lot of the work that we do on the project is helping to bring more liquidity into these markets. Our work is also helping customers to connect faster to the networks. And also we are helping to open up data that would enable customers to identify the best places that they can invest in and look to get a connection. And through all of the work that we are doing, we are helping to deliver efficiencies across the network companies to make sure that we are operating these networks securely and in the most efficient way possible. And in terms of the approach that we take with the project, we are making sure that there is fairness, transparency, and through the work that we're doing, we're helping to bring more standardization in the way the networks do things, and also we're helping to simplify a number of these processes. As we kind of go through this transition, we want to make it easier for people to engage with the networks. Next slide, please. So just in terms of so I guess all of the networks in Great Britain have made a commitment to taking a flexibility first approach. So back in 2018, we set out, we reiterated that commitment and set out 6 key principles that we would be using to help deliver that approach. I won't step through all of them, and I think you'll hear about them a bit more through our panelists later on as well. If we just go on to the final slide. So in terms of flexibility in Great Britain, so we have established world-leading local markets for flexibility. We have over 3 gigawatts of flexibility that's available for tender this year, and more than half of that has already been contracted so far in the year. So that's really good news for the flexibility markets here in the UK. Later on, you'll be hearing a bit more from my colleague Avi, who is our technical lead, about how exactly we are kind of helping to bring more liquidity into these markets, and we'll talk a bit more about our work as well and our consultation that's open at the moment. Thank you.
Right from the off there, forgetting to mute myself, I was saying thank you, Verena, for those scene-setting remarks, and we'll be coming back later this afternoon to Verena's colleague Avi Atal, who will be offering a bit of a wrap-up on ENA's Open Networks flexibility consultation and how you can get involved with it and support that initiative. But without further ado, it's time to hand over to our panelists. We're delighted to be joined by a really expert panel in this space. So Dr. Caroline Seja Damgaard, who is a researcher at the Association for Decentralized Energy. We also have Dorota Schneemann, who is Head of Markets for Flexibility at BEIS. We have Sotiris Georgopoulos, who is the Open Networks Chair and Head of Smart Grid Development at UK Power Networks, of course, one of the UK's leading energy networks. And last but not least, Louise van Rensburg, who is Head of DSO and Whole System Coordination for Ofgem. So we have the entire ecosystem represented here today to discuss the many issues relating to flexible grids. The way this is going to work is we will ask each of the panelists to speak for sort of 3 or 4 minutes at the start, just to set the scene and answer an introductory question from myself, and then we'll move into an open forum where we'll take your questions and look to explore, as I say, the case for flexible grids, the barriers to deployment, and of course the big market opportunities that are coming thereafter. Last bit of housekeeping to note is that we're recording today's session and we will put it live on Business Green, so you'll be able to watch it on demand after the event if you miss anything or want to watch it back, but that also means it is an open public forum, so if you do want to make any points in the chat or through questions, make sure they're suitable for public consumption and you're not giving away anything that you've got under a non-disclosure agreement, for example, or is meant to be highly confidential. That we are here to advance the sum of public knowledge. That's certainly the plan. Excellent. So first question for today, and the first comments, I'm coming to Dr. Caroline Damgaard. Caroline, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us. It's fallen to you to set the scene and also answer my first question of defining these terms. What is a flexible grid? And I suppose, how does it differ from the idea of a smart grid that many of us will have been familiar with for years?
Thanks, James, and hi, everyone. So yeah, we've already heard a little bit in the introductions about the importance of a flexible grid to enable greater integration of renewables on the grid, as well as helping to manage the increasing electrification of heat and transport, causing greater electricity demand on the grids. And flexibility really plays a crucial role in helping to balance those different developments. But a flexible energy grid is really also a new way of thinking about our energy system and the actors in the energy system. So a flexible energy grid is one that's managed much more actively by transmission and distribution system operators. Hence the focus that we heard Farina speak about of transitioning from network operators responsible for the physical network infrastructure to become increasingly system operators, taking a more active and dynamic approach to managing and balancing the system. But more than that, it's also a new way to think about energy users and a new way for users to engage with the energy system. So from a user's perspective, a flexible energy grid is one that opens up opportunities to gain from providing flexibility to the grid. And this goes under many terms, as James alluded to. We hear about smart grids, we hear about energy flexibility, we hear about demand side response. And they're all fairly similar concepts. But I think the tendency more and more to talk about flexibility highlights how this area is opening up and recognizing the many different ways in which flexibility can be provided, including smart appliances, but also demand side response, smart charging of electric vehicles and vehicle to grid solutions, as well as generators and storage providing flexibility to the grid. And in terms of, just to wrap up, in terms of what flexible technologies are, I think, again, taking an energy user's perspective, and in particular business energy users, it's important to highlight that flexibility can be provided by a huge range of assets. So essentially, a flexible asset we see as one that is capable of turning energy consumption or generation up or down in response to a signal. And so industry is developing innovative solutions to enable energy users to access flexibility markets in ways suitable to their specific assets and needs. And this is creating new or bringing in new actors and business models into this space, including aggregators and platform providers and other third parties who engage with businesses to help them take advantage of the opportunities for energy users to engage with the flexible energy system.
Excellent, thank you, Caroline. I mean, do you think this will become the standard term now? Because obviously, as I say, there's been a bit of a debate about terminology. Typical journalist asking about words, but do you think flexible grid does seem to be the one that most of the industry is coalescing around as the nomenclature for this body of technologies and services?
I think so, yeah. I think there's broad agreement that flexibility really captures the essence that we're talking about. I know from my own role, so I'm a researcher with the ADE, but I also work as the scheme administrator for FlexAssure, which is a compliance scheme in this space. And we actually did a public consultation on the terminology of the scheme, which originally was focused on demand side response. And through that consultation, we gained wide support for shifting towards flexibility as a more appropriate term going forward.
Absolutely, it does seem to have cut through. I mean, all our reporting now does refer to flexible grids moreover than smart grids, and I think many of our colleagues in the media are doing the same. So, looks like it's going to stick, hopefully. Excellent, thank you, Caroline. Next up, Durta, we've asked you to maybe just offer a little bit of an overview of the government's current position with regards to flexible grid and how important the policy environment is going to be in driving this nascent sector forward.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I actually prepared a couple of slides, so hopefully that kind of helps set out what government and Ofgem are doing in the flexibility space. So in terms of your question, how big a role does the kind of policy environment have in enabling the development of a flexible grid? I think it's probably fair to say that a lot of actions have been taken already to drive forward the flexibility agenda, but a lot more needs to be done. And the Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan that Ofgem and BEIS have previously, or in July, published sets out how we're kind of progressing this piece of work. So if we're going to the next slide, it kind of sets out where we're coming from, and initially, back in 2016, we ran a call for evidence on a smarter, flexible energy system and asked stakeholders, what the kind of key regulatory and policy barriers are that need to be addressed. And there was very little flexibility on the system. So that was really kind of the starting point for this kind of joint piece of work on smart and flexibility across government and Ofgem. And since then, we've published the original Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan back in 2017, published a progress update a year later. And since then, we realized, this is not kind of the end of the journey, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. So kind of the new plan, focusing on what actions we're now looking at. If we skip ahead to the next slide, another one, please. Perfect. So there's the new plan basically outlines concrete actions for industry, for the regulator and government, and we have divided the policy areas into 4 key areas. So one of which is how we can better facilitate flexibility from consumers. And this is all about how we can unlock domestic flexibility. The second area is about removing barriers to flexibility on the grid. And that specifically kind of focuses on the regulatory barriers to smart technologies, including large-scale, long-duration storage, as well as driving up the level of interconnection with Europe. The third area is how we can reform markets to reward flexibility. And kind of that's the area I'm leading on within the wider smart bracket. And this is really about making markets work for flexibility across all the different energy markets we have, and make sure that we can bring through business models. Those technologies can access new markets, and markets are coordinated in the best possible way to so eventually resulting in kind of the best optimized decisions across the system. And then lastly, it's about how we can digitalize our system. So alongside the Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan, we launched the UK's first digitalization strategy, setting out what our strategic approach is, and focusing on how we can data across the energy sector, which is driving forward innovative business models and so on. And underlying all of this is the kind of monitoring. So we have, alongside the Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan, set out how we can assess how well flexibility is doing in the market. And as part of that, we have proposed specific market indicators to measure progress, so understanding better how well flexibility is doing, which is informing our policy thinking. And secondly, we have set out kind of how we are supporting flexibility through innovation funding. So innovation is crucial to decarbonisation, and we last year launched the Net Zero Innovation Portfolio alongside the 10-point plan. And this is a 1 billion innovation program which aims to accelerate the commercialization of low carbon technologies and systems and businesses across different sectors, including power, buildings and industry. And the kind of one of the priority areas is around energy storage and flexibility. So we have pledged at least £100 million of innovation funding for flexibility in that space. So hopefully that kind of gives a first impression about all the actions that we're taking forward, and that stakeholders and industry have committed to as well. So it's obviously not just on Ofgem and government to drive that forward, it really needs the wider industry. So it kind of condenses and summarizes what we believe is needed in the short term to drive forward flexibility on the system and make sure we can move closer to that sustainable energy system of the future.
Absolutely. And Dutta, are you I suppose, are you fairly heartened by the progress that you've seen since those sort of first moves in 2016? Because, you know, we have seen a boom in the energy storage market. We've seen the emergence of these new sort of smart tariffs, time of use tariffs, and lots. We're seeing lots of innovation. It does seem that it's obviously lots still to do, but it does seem as if it's working.
I think the progress we've seen is very positive. As you say, we've seen lots of new business models. Stakeholders, so particularly aggregators, are now able to access the balancing mechanism. We've seen increased levels of demand-side response accessing the capacity market. The ESO and DNOs are moving towards standardizing flexibility markets and aligning balancing services across the distribution and transmission level. A few years ago, no one would have known what kind of distribution flexibility tenders are. So I think we've seen significant progress, but it doesn't mean we cracked the nut. I think there's still plenty to do.
Indeed, indeed. Excellent. Well, on that note, probably I will turn to Satiris from UK Power Network, who is involved in doing some of that plenty to do and deploying some of these technologies. Satiris, I suppose the question for you, maybe if you just introduce yourself and give a bit of background for those who don't know on UK Power Network's involvement in this space. And then my opening question to you would be, how do we go faster? Where are there still barriers that are hampering progress, and how do you see the sector moving even quicker in its development?
Sure. Thank you, James. I'm delighted to be here. So I head up the smart grids team at UK Power Networks, but based on Caroline's comments, I might have to change my title to head of flexible grids. It sounds like I've got the the old world term.
It's still open to debate. I'm sure there's room for both.
Fair enough. So UK Power Networks is the electricity distributor for London, East Anglia and the Southeast, down to Brighton. So we cover about 18 million customers across the Southeast, and we distribute electricity to the homes and businesses. And within that, I'm responsible for the flexibility activities. We've started in line with what Dirk outlined. We started our flexibility program about 4 years ago. And essentially, as Farina mentioned, not just across UKPM, but across the whole of the UK, we've procured about 3 gigawatts of flexibility. I think in traditional British way, I think we're quite modest about this, but I would like to make clear this is world leading market, from around the world in terms of regulation and progress that utilities are making in this space. UK is the point of reference, so it's important to say that. In terms of your question about how we go faster, it's important to understand that flexibility is going to go from quite a niche thing, which industrial and commercial and business customers have worked with, to coming, to wider mass population, basically the mass market in this decade. Right, net zero is going to affect all of us one way or the other, because it's going to electrify our cars, change our heating systems. So, what we need to see, and kind of some of the piece of the puzzle is first, affordable technology. So, to have residential flexibility, we need to have these, smarter appliances or electric vehicles or heat pumps deployed in affordable manner, so more of us can afford them. So we need affordable technology. We need, as Dirk said about the markets, the mechanisms that work and award the value to those who can offer the flexibility. We need to work on customer propositions. So how do we package this in a way that the customer understands the value and understands what's in it for them? Because at the end of the day, there is an end user, and in the future is going to be a domestic customer who's going to be the end user. And we need to think how we build trust and confidence in those markets, because it's all new. Some of the stuff, it doesn't exist. you know, and there is no blueprint either to follow. Certainly can around the world. So, and just to conclude, collaboration is very important in terms of how we accelerate. You know, the energy sector needs to work with the transport sector, needs to work with the tech sector, needs to work with all the other sectors, learn as fast as it can, bring new skills in, bring digital skills, innovate, making use of this fantastic innovation regime that we have in the UK, and try really to move things as quickly as possible to deliver net zero.
Absolutely. I just want to draw out a little bit that point you made about sort of building the market and building market acceptance. I mean, how big a challenge do you perceive that to be? I mean, we're seeing new tariffs, we're seeing new services for businesses. Is there still a big awareness piece that needs to be built here to get customers ready for what will be seen as quite a significant change?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think currently there are different, as you said, smart tariffs. There are different propositions that you know, are being put forward, and we're still trying to understand consumer behavior. You know, we've done trials where, you know, some of the providers, smart charging providers, are using free miles. Some of them are using flat tariffs. So, you know, there's a whole piece of trialing different propositions and understanding what it works for different people, and of course, as the time goes by, you know, building trust and confidence in those propositions.
Yeah, it's a fascinating space. It was actually interesting this weekend, wasn't it, when we saw the sort of the big energy price spikes that occurred this weekend, and I saw on Twitter some people who are on the tariffs, where the price changes based on time, sort of saying, "Ouch, I'm getting hurt quite bad here," but then also most of them recognizing you take a bit of the rough with the smooth and they get savings at other times. But it's a very different relationship from just handing over your money by direct debit each month as we're used to with energy bills. But yeah, lots of work to do on that front. Next up, last panelist, last but not least, we have Louise van Rensburg from Ofgem. Louise, are you there? I can see your
yes, I'm here.
You are. There we go. Your camera's dropped off for a second, but you are there. Good to welcome you. Louise is head of DSO and whole system coordination at Ofgem. Louise, I just wanted to put to you, I suppose, the big picture question, if you will, as to why this is so important. And we've talked about the terms, we've talked about the policy, we've talked about the barriers, but why do we have to get to a more flexible grid? What's the case for it?
Yeah, so a really good question, and I mean, you can probably have a very complicated answer, but I think you can also have a really simple answer, and that is, if we don't have flexibility, then everyone's going to have to pay more to get to net zero, and we don't want that to happen. It's also going to be something that has a real impact on the choices individuals can make. So, for example, you know, deciding whether or not to buy an EV may hinge on whether they can charge their car. And of course, the confidence that people have in the system and the lights staying on, that's going to be impacted by how well we can actually get flexibility into our market and help support that confidence in our security of supply. So I think Dörte may have mentioned this, but you know, when you just look at the pound values, with Bayes' modeling estimating flexibility can reduce system costs of between 30 to 70 billion when you look across the 30 years between 2020 and 2025. That's a big number. So, you know, flexibility isn't everything we need to get to net zero, but we really do need everyone to play their part to make flexibility a viable option. And that too makes it really important. It's not something just one part of our industry can do. It really is going to involve everyone. Certainly ourselves as regulators, along with government, we know we need to change some of our regulations. We've got to make sure that the right incentives and the right protections are in place. And we're also looking more broadly at whether other aspects need to change in the system to really support our new net zero world. You know, we need the ESO and the network companies to coordinate with each other and others like local authorities to make sure we actually do have an efficient whole system. We need network companies to be more transparent with planning and operational information and really do a good job of fostering that aligned development of flexibility markets to make sure that it's easy for flexibility providers and indeed customers more widely to take part and offer up flexibility with confidence. Obviously, that's not the only people. We also need suppliers and aggregators to come forward with new products that customers can take up. We need flexibility providers to come forward to help us understand what else is needed to make this happen. So yes, to summarize, the topic's important not just because of the outcome in terms of pound values and the impact on our choices and our security of supply, but it's important because it really does need everyone to pull together.
Absolutely. And there's a question I'm going to put to the whole panel before we open up for the questions that I see coming in on the Q&A. But how mature are the technologies that can enable flexible grids here? Because it strikes that, you know, as Sotira said, we are world leading. We're kind of at the cutting edge of this in the UK. There's few other markets that are advanced as this, but there's a real mix of technologies here. Some that are really sort of bleeding edge innovations, others like batteries and so on that have been around for quite some time. You know, if we want to build a flexible grid, do we already have the components and this is all about deployment, or is there still quite significant technology risk here? I mean, Louise, as the regulator, I suppose that's an absolutely critical question that Ofgem has to consider.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think for a lot of these things, there's ways and means of making things happen. And what might be the right answer today might not be the right answer tomorrow. So I do believe that right now there's a lot of advancement that's happened. There's a lot of systems and structures in place. There is a lot going on. The problem is it's not enough yet. We need to broaden it. We need to expand it, and that's why the investment and some of the innovation funding that government are making available, and some of the investment money that's available through network price controls is still really important to make sure that we can continue to develop the technology. And equally, topics like making sure that standards are in place to make it interoperable, so that different types of technology can still talk to each other, and ultimately you can have a usable framework.
Absolutely. Caroline, same question to you. I mean, how confident are you and your members that the technologies are there, or is this still quite early stage stuff?
So I think much in line with what Louise perhaps was saying there, I think the technology is relatively well established, especially in the INC market. So we touched on this previously as well, that the INC market is where much of the flexibility has been happening to date. So it's the domestic market where there's really a lot of development going on right now. That said, it is an area across INC and domestic undergoing development and innovation constantly. And so while existing technology does demonstrate that energy flexibility can and is already an important part of the solution, it is really crucial to stay open to innovation, new innovative technologies, as well as business models, and to keep that in mind as government and network operators design markets for flexibility. And regulations for that matter.
And I'll come to Sotiris with the next question. Given the types of technologies that are out there and the services that are out there, what's the pitch to kind of business customers? Because, you know, we've got a business audience here. You know, why should they look at taking advantage of these types of services and technologies?
Yeah, so James, I think that there's two aspects to this. So first of all, I think if you are a business that can provide flexibility, so they can flex their energy, there is an additional revenue stream, right? So you can reduce your bills basically by providing this additional service, provided you are on the right location and provided you have the right. So I think that's the first pitch. The second pitch is this is a new emerging market that is going to accelerate significantly over the next 10 years. And whether you are looking at technology, whether that technology is IT or telecoms, or you are looking at hardware and software, or you are just looking at customer propositions, there is a huge amount to be done. You know, to your question, is the technology established? Yes, there's a lot of established technology that we know it works, like batteries, but there is a lot of components and a lot of plumbing that needs to come together to make it work and the end result is still a concept to be proven. So I think there is a lot of business opportunity in this sector over the next 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dirta, what's the how can government then help with that, sort of promote that opportunity, I suppose, and engage more businesses with this space? Because it does strike there's still a big untapped opportunity here. There's lots of businesses that could be taking advantage of these services that just still aren't.
Yeah, and I think there are several parts of it. So first of all, I did mention it previously already. We've launched this big innovation program. We're facilitating innovative business ideas in the flexibility space and have committed more than £100 million towards that. So I think that is one aspect, how we are helping push along the commercialization of new innovative business solutions in the flexibility space. I think one aspect that is probably worth mentioning as well, towards how developed is the technology. I think one area that I think we're still where there's still a big question mark is on long duration large scale storage. So do we have that? Is the tech in that space ready? And if yes, or if no, what do we need to do to drive that forward? And what I want to mention here is that we launched a storage, a long duration energy storage competition recently. So that kind of applies to all storage technologies that can deliver energy beyond 4 hours, but it's also the seasonal storage that we might need in future. So we're doing lots of work on that question. Do we actually have enough energy in future when we're shifting the kind of heating side onto the electricity system? Does that work? Do we need to do more in that space? So we're thinking a lot about that, and at the same time we launched a call for evidence to seek views from the wider market and stakeholders, and collate evidence on the challenges that long duration large scale storage might face in the market, and how these could be best addressed going forward. I think the other, sorry,
I was about to say, I mean, presumably that's a huge issue, isn't it? Because for some people, particularly for critics of the whole net zero transition, when you hear flexibility, you kind of think less stability, not more. I suppose there must be a big part of your planning must be to try and address that concern that we're potentially undermining energy security as we make this transition.
I think it's probably fair to say that whatever we do, energy and security is hugely important, and we need to really carefully think about how we can ensure that we can maintain security of supply at all times. And we've got the capacity market in place, which is working well. And beyond that, we're thinking about the wider energy market and whether further reforms are needed.
Absolutely. Caroline, you wanted to come in on this question of how we build awareness and trust in what is still quite a nascent market.
Yeah, I just wanted to contribute to that point with my FlexiSure hat on, which again is a compliance scheme for flexibility services providers, so third parties working with business energy users. And a really big piece of the work that we do at FlexiSure is going out to business energy users and trade associations to talk about flexibility and talk about the opportunities that are available to businesses. And that definitely is still a piece of work that needs to continue for years to come. And the other side of that is then making sure that businesses feel comfortable beginning their journey in flexibility. And that's where customer assurance becomes really crucial, and having standards that third parties commit to and that customers can sort of hold their energy partners to. So again, that's where FlexiSure comes in and starts defining standards, starts defining what is good practice in flexibility markets.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to start working through some of the questions that we have coming in through the Q&A function. Lots and lots of really interesting questions. And as ever, a bit of a mix between some quite technical questions and some more big picture issue-based questions. We'll start with the big picture stuff first, and then dig into some of the more technical issues that are raised. one here that we have from an anonymous attendee, mysterious. How do we get the mass market involved? They say, it seems to me that we are always speaking to the industry and the converted to a large extent. Are we getting the message across positively, especially when the media still just concentrates on price increases for the most part? Yeah, a really important question. Who wants to go first with that one? I mean, how do we? Yeah, Dorte, I mean, how do we get this across the mass market that this is available and coming now?
I think it's a really important question, and I went to, well, not went, but attended a recent event, and I was quite surprised to hear from a small group of stakeholders that they think that government and BEIS's views, government and Ofgem's views on kind of the scale of consumer participation is unrealistic. I don't think we have actually set out specific expectations yet, but I think what we're trying to do is better understand what the scale of response could be from the domestic side. Ultimately, we're trying to ensure we can get flexibility from a wide range of technologies and services. So we kind of want to hedge our bet and make sure that, you know, we're driving forward lots of actions that can push forward ways in how we can unlock the domestic flexibilities that lies in front of us, and we have to explore to which extent households and consumers will take this up. And it's probably worth mentioning that we launched a project, so the Alternative Energy Markets project through innovation funding. And what this project tries to explore is whether in an alternative system of network and policy price signals, whether customers would change their behavior. So it's about better understanding whether this enables then suppliers to develop more innovative energy products, which then in turn incentivize consumers to adopt smarter technologies and ultimately reward them for shifting the energy demand. So hopefully we get lots of learnings from this trial, and particularly understand, you know, what the scale of response could be in future if we make these kind of signals, whether it's network or price signals, if we make them actually stronger.
Absolutely. Caroline, sorry, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I'll just, in the danger of repeating myself, bring in that point about standards again and best practice. As flexibility expands into the mass market, I think that becomes such a crucial piece as well, to make sure that we prevent sort of negative experiences that come to define domestic flexibility, and really make sure that the journey into domestic flexibility is positive for consumers. And I know government and Ofgem are looking at customer protections, FlexAssure as well, currently only focusing on business flexibility, but we are engaging with actors across the flexibility industry to discuss how to start setting standards for domestic flexibility and how to support domestic customers entering into the flexibility world. And I think having an independent body there who can be that trusted body providing trusted guidance and information to customers becomes really crucial, because for domestic customers this is such a complicated space to figure out, and it can be hard to understand what information to trust.
I have a couple more questions on the domestic front, which I think probably good to group them together. Maeve Holly asks, has the introduction of smart meters in domestic properties increased flexibility from consumers and enabled that? And I suppose a related question is, you know, is the smart meter technology there at sufficient scale and with sufficient functionality to deliver the kind of flexibility we want to see? Satiris, I'll come to you first, then maybe to Louise.
Sure. James, I just wanted to pick up something you from the previous question as well. Is how do we get people engaged? And you know, from our experience, both businesses and domestic customers, when they see the value, show me the money. That's what we hear when it comes to flexibility. The Energy Saving Trust has done some work that shows that if you engage in a smart charging of an electric vehicle, if you have one, you can save up to 250 quid a year on your bills, right? Which is a considerable amount of your bills. Now, if you can get 250 quid off, and it's simple to do it, right? So it doesn't include lots of hassle. And I think that's where the second bit comes. You know, it has to be simple. And I think the business models and the propositions that are going to prevail are the ones that are going to be, you know, simple. We are portraying the energy system is getting very complicated, but I don't think anyone will want to engage with that level of complexity. We like it because we work in this industry, but I don't think anyone else really wants to engage with us. So it has to be simple. So I think that's a key point. Is smart metering technology increasing? Yes, it is, because it gives you the granularity, gives you the visibility that allows you to design some of these customer propositions, right? And we've invested in smart metering. It's taken longer than it should, but it is there. We've invested, and certainly, I'll with my energy networks hat on, you know, we are now start gaining access to some of that data, which they can help us, you know, manage our networks better and reduce overall costs. So yes, the technology is moving, but we have smart metering. I think we need to make sure we utilize the benefits from that deployment.
Yeah, absolutely. Louise, to you, I mean, how big a deal is this smart meter rollout? I mean, presumably this is kind of the foundations of so much of what we're talking about, both at a business level and obviously at a domestic level.
No, absolutely. I think smart meters is and always have been just enablers. They're not a magic gold ticket that suddenly everyone's going to be doing something zooty. But what they do is help give more granular level information in an area that we just haven't traditionally had that level of granular data. So as Satiris has just said, you know, now network companies are getting more visibility about what's happening on those low voltage networks in a much more cost effective way than if they were to have to roll out you know, more technical equipment. Similarly, it gives suppliers more granular information about what customers are doing, and that is going to be incredibly useful as they start shaping new tariffs. It isn't the end of the picture at all. I mean, I think smart meters will help, but we do need more to happen as well, in a more sort of cohesive package, I guess. So we've got, you know, smart meters might allow people to sort of access and understand the importance of moving to new tariffs, but we've got to make sure that those new tariffs actually get offered and that they're easy to compare and people can understand them and it's simple to switch. Equally, you know, smart meters might also signal to people that they need to do a lot more on energy efficiency, and that will also help us meet our net zero targets. I mean, energy efficiency sometimes gets lost as we talk about flexibility, but that's equally incredibly important to help us meet our net zero targets. So I think there's a lot of more work and focus that needs to happen in looking specifically at how we can engage domestic households a lot more. And I know, you know, we're doing some thinking about that at Ofgem and sort of understanding what else we need to do in this space as well. So it's an excellent question and a really important one.
Yeah, absolutely. I have so many questions we're getting here. So just looking at which to go to next. One question about the sort of the data that's coming through. Jim Allen asked, do you think the industry currently has the right data foundations in place to be able to speed up the digital innovation and harness the value of flexibility? I mean, is the right data there? Or is that another area that we're going to need to see further progress to really unlock things here? Who wants to have a go at that one?
Yeah, I can.
I'll come to. Oh, everyone's coming in. Caroline, go to you first, then Satiris.
Yeah, I'll just really briefly say that is a crucial topic that industry is engaging with the network operators about at the moment around the presumed open approach to data, so the increasing transparency between industry and network operators. And I think we'll be learning a lot as data becomes more and more open over the next few years. We'll be learning more and more about whether it's the right data that we have, or if we need to rethink the data that is collected and the way that we collect it. But definitely progress being made in terms of required transparency between parties.
Absolutely. Satiris, you wanted to come in too on that one?
Yeah, I think in terms of data foundations, we have good data foundations for the larger part of the network and of the what we call the higher voltage levels, which is the macro stuff. When you go to street level networks, one of the pieces of the next 5 years is to build better data understanding, and there we are going to need to use smart metering data. We're going to need to put more monitors and sensors on the network, and we need to use new AI machine learning techniques to do that. But we are building a foundation. As Caroline mentioned, this whole piece about presumed open is that data now, it's not just for us. There's a huge commitment. It's been huge progress in the industry the last 2 or 3 years in opening up the data. So UK Power Networks is about to launch an open data portal. All network companies have a similar initiative where we're sharing that data, which allows others to build on that data and figure out innovations and figure out business models and figure out services that they can offer on the back of our own data. And I think that's going to really accelerate progress in this space.
Absolutely. Got a really interesting question here about one of the challenges the sector faces. Matthew Cullen asked that the biggest issue with encouraging business customers and customers as a whole to take up flexibility is just the piecemeal revenue streams that are scattered across the industry. So you can take advantage of the capacity market, BM, BC, local flex markets as well, and potentially others to follow. Yeah, I mean, obviously revenue stacking is the way that a lot of companies and battery providers and the like are taking advantage of that, but that's sort of inherently quite complicated. Is there a way of making it less piecemeal and easier for businesses and developers to access? Dutta and Louise, I suppose that feels like a question for you. I mean, is that that's a critique you probably hear a lot? I mean, what's your response to those concerns that at the moment it is still quite complicated for
yeah, no, I mean,
I
completely agree that this is an issue, and it's something that we need to make a lot more simpler for people to access. So actually, we are constantly making sure that one of the priority areas in the Open Networks program is about coordinating, aligning, and there are a number of strands to that coordination and alignment work. But the comment that was made about the sort of pre-qualifications and how that can be aligned is definitely one of the items that we've identified are really important.
Absolutely. Dutta, do you want to come in on that also?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and I agree with everything that Louise has just said. I think the difficulty is that everything is becoming ever more complex, and a lot of things happened over the last couple of years, and National Grid is doing huge reforms to their balancing services. And just in the first place, making sure that every aspect and service that you actually provide to the system is valued as well, is a key aspect of that. But the bigger question is then, how do you bring that all together and make sure you're coming forward with products that basically mean you can, in the most cost-effective way, meet kind of the future system needs. And I think that's a really huge challenge for National Grid.
Absolutely. I've got a couple of questions on sorry, Satiris, I see you raised a hand there. Do you want to
Sure, James, a couple of points
revenue stacking question.
Yeah, just to say about the DNO, the DSO flexibility services we've introduced, the flexible grid services, they are designed from the beginning without any exclusivity clauses. So we are trying to design out any potential conflicts with other contracts. I mean, of course, the revenue stacking remains a challenge, but I want to highlight that we designed the contracts we are offering across all networks, because we now have a common standard contract for flexibility services across the UK, that we've designed it as open and as flexible as possible. So I think this is an important point.
Yeah, absolutely. Got a couple of questions about sort of consumer and end user protection, which I think are really important issues. Paul Jarman notes that half-hourly time of use tariffs look like they're going to be, or they encourage that flexible use. They look like they're going to be critical to getting to a zero carbon energy system, particularly when you're looking at sort of people plugging in their EVs or using their heat pumps and the like. But he says, can these tariffs work whilst protecting customers from exposure to market irregularities? such as day-ahead trading, that could lead to price spikes, or the recent price spikes that we've just seen in Texas and, of course, in the UK this weekend. You could undermine confidence in the sector quite quickly if you had a quite anomalous set of circumstances that led to price spikes, even if they were relatively brief. I mean, how can this flexible grid sector manage that risk, I suppose, and manage that particular challenge? Caroline, I'll come to you first. And then maybe everyone will have a view on this one because it's such an important question.
Yeah, I wonder if Louise might have a comprehensive answer to that. One thing that I would like to highlight here is, as we start to look more and more at domestic flexibility, there is a very big focus on smart and fair. Much research going on across the industry around how smart tariffs and other forms of flexibility from domestic customers can be done in a fair way. Much focus on vulnerable consumers. How does a flexible system for consumers, how does that work for, and importantly, not against vulnerable consumers? And there's some really important pieces of work. The Center for Sustainable Energy is doing some really interesting work on smart and fair, and that's something that we're engaging with very much around how customer protections might work in the domestic flexibility world.
Absolutely. Louise, do you want to come on that worry that people will have about price spikes?
No, I think it's an absolutely valid worry. It's very much a live question that we're doing more thinking about at Ofgem. So there's probably more to come out in this space in the future. I think for now, I'd probably say that there's the two ends of the spectrum, but there's that whole range in the middle. So where there are people that want to be more engaged and be more active, I think we should allow those people to do so. But equally, we don't want to put people that are already in fuel poverty and even worse fuel poverty. And in some respects, that is what suppliers do by offering a range of tariffs. If there's a choice, then customers can have that choice. But I think there's a lot of debate going forward about, what is that balance between choice and getting people to move and shift their consumption. So it's very much a live question, a really important question, but one that doesn't yet have a complete answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And a flip side to that, I mean, Caroline touched on it, the fair question. I mean, somebody's asked here, are we in danger of creating another sort of potential split in society? Where, if you can afford an EV and these smart technologies, then you can access really cheap energy prices. Whereas if you can't, you're potentially stuck with more expensive prices, and we could see that sort of disparity widening still further. I mean, Dirta, from a policymaker's perspective, I mean, how big a concern is that this could be seen as something that benefits wealthier households?
I think it's really important that we need to consider these aspects as part of the wider policy process. And there are lots of schemes in place already that protect vulnerable consumers. And I think going forward, there needs to be more emphasis on that. And we need to consider quite carefully how consumer protection works in that kind of flexible world. I think, there are lots of things that we need to consider, and it's certainly not my area of expertise. I'm pretty much focusing on the markets element, but we have got just within the smart space someone leading specifically on consumer engagement and looking at cybersecurity, vulnerable customers, etc. So it's something that we absolutely need to consider and bake into any kind of future policy design.
Yeah, absolutely. Got a really important question here from Hazel Stenson asking, how can and should local government get involved? Because, by definition, some of these projects are, well, almost all of them are done at the local level. Obviously, we could have a really good national policy framework, but then if it's not backed up at the local level, we're going to have problems. I mean, I'll come to Satiris because obviously UK Power Networks works a lot with local authorities. I mean, how proactive are they, and what can be done to help engage them more with this area?
Yeah, absolutely. It varies, James. I think what we are seeing with local authorities, and they are absolutely a critical part of this in delivering net zero. So critical local authorities in our area, but also across the UK, they've declared climate emergency. They have climate action plans. I think what we are seeing is that there's still a bit of gap between the aspiration and the commitments in the climate action plan and the deliver and the reality of delivering some of these. So as part of the work that we are undertaking, working with local authorities and other stakeholders, we are trying to facilitate and try to help them, support them, create local energy plans that are investable. So where you have local authorities, for example, that have renewable aspirations, try to help them understand better what it means about the infrastructure that is required to enable those connections, or where they have flexibility options, try to help them understand how that works. This isn't going to be a 5-minute fix. I think it's a process that we've talked about for many years. It's now becoming real. And I think over the next probably 5 years, we're going to see again this area that we're going to see bigger acceleration with the concept of local energy plans, and the fact that companies like UK Power Networks and the other energy networks are putting a lot more resources to support some of the local authorities in making their plans a reality.
Absolutely. Caroline, sorry, you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, just very briefly, just to add that there's sort of two ways in which local authorities play a role in a flexible energy system. One, as Satiris talked about, is through their local energy planning, but also as energy users. So local authorities are starting to look at how they themselves can benefit from flexible solutions, providing flexibility to the grid. So important as an energy user as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm mindful of time, so I'm just going to take one last quick question, then we'll have a couple of questions to wrap up from myself. Michael Corcoran, you might be able to see there in the chat, has made a really interesting point about, and several other people have raised the question of sort of aggregating demand and taking this into a more community level rather than just at a single building level or a single home level. He points to the particular concern he has about, we try and achieve net zero buildings, we put PV arrays in place, and that draws a boundary around a single entity that lacks systemic thinking and could leave us with a legacy of energy supply capacity poorly matched to seasonal demand. Yeah, and as I say, several other people have sort of raised the question about aggregating and pooling homes or streets or estates together to manage, enable flexible demand in this way. I mean, how important an opportunity is that? And is that an area that we're starting to see work being done? Who shall I come to? Caroline, sorry, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely a really good point, and I think there's definitely potential. I do know that there are community organizations who are looking into providing flexibility as a community. Social housing providers is also an area that's interesting from an aggregation point of view, but I don't think it's going to be an either or sort of solution. I think we need to look at all of those different ways in which flexibility can be aggregated, whether that's at the individual, community, street, social housing level. I think all of those will play an important part.
Yeah, absolutely. Berta, do you want to come in on that at all? Is it, I mean, what can be done to sort of enable more community level projects?
So I think, whether that's kind of the local market side or, further down the network community energy, I think it will become more and more important, and local sources of flexibility can provide significant value to both the local and national market, but only if there's sufficient investment and coordination with national markets in place. So we have set out actions in the Smart Systems and Flexibility Plan that is kind of looking in delivering a step change in that coordination aspect on bringing local and national markets closer together. So again, all about alignment and standardization of market rules, integration of platforms and control rooms. But this requires data standardization and architecture with transparent and clear rules, so then we can scale up flexibility and integrate them into that kind of national kind of setup. So we have a very strong interest in flexibility platforms, particularly what kind of value they could bring to that locational level. And we see, significant value in those platforms. So we've previously supported a flexibility competition, which resulted in 2 local flexibility platforms exploring how this could be done. There are lots of other trials underway or have recently finished, such as the Cornwall Local Energy Market, Power Responsive. There's the Nodes Interflex platform, Project Trader, Piclo Flexibility Marketplace, Project Leo. There's so much going on. So it's a really exciting time to work on this and to consider how we can further unlock that local value.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one final question I wanted to touch on, which hasn't been raised, but I think it's a really important one. Is a few years ago, I think it was the Mail on Sunday, it might have been the Daily Mail, they ran a front page story about sinister fridges. And this was the idea that your fridge would become sinister because it would be controlled by an external technology that would turn your fridge off or your freezer off at periods of peak demand. And this was a sinister conspiracy, no less. And it's kind of like a sort of consumer-led version of the concern that's always hampered the demand response market for businesses, of businesses saying, well, I don't want to be told when I have to power down or reduce my energy use or the like. And no matter how many times you try and assure them that it won't cause any disruption and it will save people money, there's this sort of psychological desire to maintain control and not allow these technologies in. That strikes as a potentially big barrier for the emergence of these types of flexible grid technologies, both at the business and the domestic level. What, if anything, can be done to assuage these concerns that, as the market expands, will only become more visible? I think we'll probably be hearing more about the sinister fridges on the front page of the Mail in time. Yeah, is that something the sector's looking to try and assuage those concerns and build trust and confidence so that people can take advantage of these technologies? Caroline, you come in first, maybe.
Yes, this is definitely something that the flexibility industry is very aware of, and wanting to avoid any such Daily Mail news stories. There has been discussion with the distribution network operators around how to deal with emergency situations, and there's ongoing discussions around potential emergency measures that would enable network operators to take off demand in case of emergencies. And that is something that is really worrying from an industry perspective and needs to be designed really, really carefully and defined really, really clearly to make sure that it doesn't send a signal to consumers that operators could essentially exercise control over domestic assets. So that's something, yeah, really important to come to the appropriate conclusion to those discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. Dottie, you've got your hand up. Then Louise, I want to come to you as well as the regulator on this question.
Yeah, I guess just what I'd like to add is that the focus, or suppliers really need to think about how they can make time of use tariffs more attractive and raise awareness and understanding for these kind of new tariffs, and make them appealing and a positive choice. So I think there is a lot to be said in how we can, kind of push suppliers more towards innovative business models. And I think eventually all of the suppliers have to have a rethink in how they make money, because it just the kind of current supply model doesn't really work anymore. And perhaps there needs to be lots of rethinking in how we're or what kind of value and tariffs we're offering to customers. So perhaps maybe we need to explore different routes. Is it more about providing a certain level of comfort in people's homes, or temperature, whatever it is? But I think then perhaps we're already seeing some interesting new tariffs out there, but it's probably more the exception than the norm at the moment.
No, there's some fascinating trials going on around sort of heat as a service, sort of buying your heat in the same way you buy your mobile phone plans, that I just think could be really, really interesting and innovative way of doing things. Louise, I wanted to come in to you also on that question of, should we worry about the march of the sinister fridge?
The march of the sinister fridge, I love it. I mean, that in a way is exactly what some people agree to do when they sign up for, and across the world, other examples, like in California, that's what they do. They get everyone to put a piece of kit, and they get their air conditioning turned off at certain times when the network is particularly in trouble. And that's exactly, I think, some of the stuff that Caroline was talking about earlier. What we are concerned about is making sure that customers are properly protected. So where a customer chooses to allow someone to have that level of control, we want to make sure that they're going in with their eyes wide open. They haven't been missold, and because, you know, generally someone will agree to do that because there's a money back or a potential cost savings that they will get. We don't want people to unnecessarily overinflate that and sell them something that will never happen. But equally, where people are comfortable in doing that, you know, that could be very helpful for aggregators to be able to provide more domestic level services into the greater grid. So that's one of the reasons why we are still looking at what is the consumer protection in this area, and the topic of whether or not Ofgem should start to license aggregators has certainly been an ongoing conversation that's been going on for some time, and I believe there'll be some more thoughts on that coming out, if not later on this year, possibly early next year. I'm not 100% sure, but I do think that it will continue to be an ongoing issue, because I know within the industry there's also been discussions around with the rollout of EVs, should DNOs have some ability to turn down and control those. Now, I think there was quite a strong pushback towards that, and that conversation has certainly drawn back quite a lot to be a kind of last resort, and the conversations are now about defining, so what's the last resort? You know, how do you define last resort? Because I think people would want there to be something that could be done to prevent the lights going out, but they only want it to be done in an absolute emergency area and not interfering with their day-to-day.
Yeah.
So that debate will continue. It is very much a live debate, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Very complex transition to be managed. We're almost out of time. I want to bring in Avi very briefly, but I just wanted to give everyone a chance for their one final closing comment. If you will, a bit of a challenge for you in 3 words or at the most 1 sentence. What do you expect the energy system to look like in 2030? How flexible can we get by that point, given that we need to have massively slashed emissions by then, if to put ourselves on track for net zero by 2050. I will come to Satiris first.
Flexibility everywhere. That would be my response.
You did it in 2 words. Did it in 2 words. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Satiris. Caroline, come to you next.
I'll add decentralized with well-coordinated, increasingly automated, and closer to real-time flexibility markets.
Absolutely. Louise, what would be your take on what it will look like in 2030?
So 3 words: coordinated and efficient.
Good to hear. These are all good words. This is encouraging stuff, and I suppose the sense there that this is inevitable, that these technologies are there, they are working, and this trend is one that's going to continue, hopefully fast. Durta, the final words are yours.
I would say increased data transparency and interoperability, automation, and in bold, low carbon flexibility.
Absolutely. A low carbon, digital, decentralized, coordinated, and everywhere energy system is on the way. That's certainly the hope. Excellent. Thank you so much to our panel for their views, and to give us a bit more perspective on how we're going to get to that promised land. Our final speaker is Dr. Avinash Atal from the Energy Networks Association, who's going to offer a bit of an overview on the Open Networks Flexibility consultation that's currently going on. So please do hang around to check that out. Avi, the floor is yours.
Thanks, James. Picking up from an excellent panel session, I think this is an opportunity to go to the slightly granular level of the work we do in open networks. Starting off from where Farina left off, we're at an incredible stage in UK right now, being 3 gigawatts of flexibility tendered this year. But I think it's important to note the incremental increase in the flexibility market over the past 4 years. And open networks has been instrumental in streamlining some of the processes and the activities going into the DSO flexibility market. Next slide, please. So each year, within open networks, we flesh out key areas of work that needs to be built upon from the past year. And we call them products that stream across some or all these different blocks identified here. And we build that on from year on year. But one of the key aspects of this work is the stakeholder engagement. This is an opportunity for everybody within the energy industry, really, because if one thing that's clear from the panel is that everybody directly or indirectly involved with energy system are going to be influenced by the flexibility market. So it's an opportunity for everybody to feed into the work we've done, critique the work perhaps, and highlight to us the pressure points and perhaps the key areas they would like us to focus on. So this year we've, next slide please. So this year, this is slightly technical, I admit, and I apologize, but this is the key areas of focus for this year, broadly under flexible services and flexible connections. And within the consultation, we've requested people to give us comments on specific questions under each of these products, or perhaps even a high level view of how they use flex figures, what are the kind of things they'd like us to see us do, and things like that. Next slide, please. So as now we have 2 consultations live. One is across the flexibility products, what we call work stream. So this is a consultation which has specific questions across the 9 active products this year. And also we have one specific consultation that is exclusively on the standard agreement that's gone live this year. So as Sotiris mentioned, this is a contract which is which is an attempt to streamline services across DSO and ESO and is technology agnostic. So this is a key element which has a very focused and dedicated audience for this. So we have a separate consultation, both of which are live right now. And the couple of key publications that go hand in hand with this consultation that hopefully helps the external stakeholder understand our work, our thought processes, our key questions, and hopefully help them engage with this activity better. I'm assured that these slides will be shared. So I think you can pick up these links and definitely respond to it. And we within Open Networks are committed to reviewing every single input that we get and take that on board and respond to that as well. So I think in interest of time, I'll park my slides here and I'll hand back to James for questions.
Excellent, thank you very much, Avi. You've mentioned it there, but what types of organisations are you hoping will get involved? I mean, presumably you want to get as broader level of input as possible, not just the people who are directly involved in these services.
So this consultation is open for any and every member of public, because like it's clear to us that flexibility has a wide remit. So some of the questions will be focused to the stakeholders who are directly involved or affected by it, but there are also questions that are broader. So to summarize, I think we are looking for input from everyone who can and wants to engage with this activity. And this is an opportunity to feed into our work as well. So it's a way to contribute as well.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, our audience typically, environmentally focused. Business Green is the title there. I mean, how significant is this work and this consultation to delivering those environmental benefits, both obviously emissions as the main one, but air pollution and other benefits also? Well,
I think it's been pretty clear that flexibility is imperative in the net zero journey. And within Open Networks, we've tried to streamline this entire process. So I think bringing them both together and seeing inputs from the people who are actually be using or directly affected by this is definitely essential. So yeah.
Absolutely. And one of the, I mean, I hate to be a cynical journalist, but one of the things you hear complain about, that certainly NGOs complain to me about all the time, is they put all this work into consultation responses, and then what happens with it is always the critical question. So can you just sort of map out a little bit about what you're planning to to do with those responses and the progress that you'd like to see this unlock?
So in terms of the actual process, we collate every single response we get, and we create a general publication out of that saying that here's what you said, here's what our response is, and what the actions that come out of it, so that there's a sense of continuity and also a sense of accountability in every single input we get. And as things stand, we will use these inputs perhaps to shape our work for the next year as well, because we are right now in the process of defining what needs to be done for the year 2022. So some of the inputs from this can feed into that exercise as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Farina, I understand you want to come in on this also.
Yes, thanks, James. So I think, yeah, in line with what Annie said, I think, with the Open Networks project, I think collaboration and being transparent in the work that we do are pretty much core principles, in our work. So I think it's not just for the consultations, we are open to getting feedback from stakeholders and from the wider community as and when. So, with all the responses that we get, as Evie said, we analyze them in detail. We also publish them to our website, but, we are open for further chat. But I guess the main thing to say really is, if you've got feedback to share with us, don't just wait for consultations. Feel free to get in touch with us.
Absolutely. And I know you've touched on this already, both of you, but I suppose the development of some kind of standardization is so vital here, isn't it? I mean, it is an early stage industry. You don't want to go through the fears that have hit so many early stage industries of operators who aren't necessarily abiding by best practices, or whether deliberately or just by mistake, just not delivering at the level that's required. That standardization, if you can get it in early, will surely aid the entire sector.
Absolutely agree with that. And I think as we've set out, our main objective really is to try to get that standardization thing, not just across the DNOs, but also, at a more national level with the ESO as well. We want to kind of simplify the processes through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Avi, anything to add on that?
Nothing more really. I think that's just like Farina mentioned, at the moment that continues and has been our focus going, in the past and going forward.
Absolutely. And as everyone can see, a little public service announcement there from Emily and the team at Energy Networks Association. So there's another event coming up on the 22nd of September that you can learn more about these consultations and the pursuit of standards, and also an email address that you can contact there. Also, I'm actually going to ask Avi and Farina to do their 3-word response to my challenge of what they think the grid and the energy sector will look like in 2030. I mean, how quickly do you think we can see these changes come to fruition? Avi, for yourself first.
I think I'll go on a limb and say smart and flexible. And so I think that's my 2 words for the future. And over to you, Farina.
That would cover the naming challenge that we had at the start. We'll stick with both. And Farina.
Yeah, so I guess when we are limited to 3 words, it is a bit challenging, but decarbonized, decentralized, and fully digitalized.
Absolutely, excellent. I think that's something to aspire to, and it can't be stressed enough that this is only a decade, but by early 2030s, we're looking at potentially a fully zero carbon grid. I mean, it is a truly rapid and remarkable transformation that we have to achieve to put the UK and indeed the rest of the industrialized world on track to deliver net zero emissions. Something we haven't really touched on there, actually, that other point of that if we get this right in the UK, the export opportunity is absolutely massive, because this really is a global technological revolution that's going to have to play out if we are to deliver the low carbon grids that are critical to delivering a stable climate and prosperity for all, which is what this green economy and this green mission is all about. Avi, you just wanted to come in with some final comments.
Yes, I've noticed a couple of questions that are broader in terms of the remit in the Q&A session.
Oh.
I would like to request the stakeholders on the call to explore the publication of Open Networks. There are some questions we came on data and some on planning exercise. Although most of the discussion on this call has been on flexibility, which is one of the work streams, I would definitely encourage the stakeholders here to explore some of the other publications on. So I think that will answer quite a few questions coming in the Q&A sessions there.
Yeah, absolutely. A key point. This is the whole event and this project from ENA is very much intended as a dialogue. So people do please get in touch. As you say, the email address is there. And as Abby and Farina mentioned, they are committed to reading every missive that they get and responding to it as best they can. Excellent. I think we are probably therefore coming to a close from what's been a fascinating session. I have to do a little bit of a public service announcement, or a plug. Actually, let's call it what it is, a shameless plug. I will just drop into the chat now the link to the Net Zero Festival that Business Green will be hosting at the end of the month. And if you haven't signed up to that, it is free to do so, and it promises to be a fascinating 3 days of broadcast content coming live from the Shard, talking to many sort of top experts right across the green economy on how we turbocharge this net zero transition, flexible grids obviously being one crucial part of it, but there are a myriad other technologies and business models that need to be evolved, and we're here to report on them and try and promote them and drive them forward in what's going to be a hugely busy and consequential autumn for this entire sector, with COP26 looming and myriad policy decisions coming out of government in the coming weeks and months. Excellent. All that's left for me to do then is say a huge thank you to all our panelists, to Louise, to Caroline, to Satiris, to Durta, and then to Farina and Abby from the ENA. A huge thank you to the Energy Networks Association for their support of this event and helping to make it possible. Without support of sponsors, we couldn't stage events like this. As I mentioned, this is all recorded, so you can catch up on it on anything you've missed. I think we are able to make the slides available, but I will double check, and if you need them, then just do email and we'll do our best to share them as required. And I will at this point say thanks everyone for joining us, and hopefully you'll join us again soon for the next Business Green webinar.